welcome to this brand new season of Leaders of Tomorrow, the only enabling platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we've understood what matters the most to you, the entrepreneur, and in our 8th year, we're taking head-on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that of funding and mentoring. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. On the show tonight, we're bringing you part 1 of an exclusive conversation with the chairman of NASSCOM, Keshav Murugesh. In this conversation, I spoke to him about the big picture at NASSCOM, the importance really of skilling as far as India's youth is concerned, as well as the role that NASSCOM is playing when it comes to enabling this transition with the help of government and other key stakeholders. Take a listen. Thank you very much, Keshav, for taking the time to join us here on the show, talking about all the exciting things that are happening at NASSCOM. And congratulations, sir. This is the first time we've met you since you've taken over as chairman at NASSCOM. So my first question is really that, what are you doing in terms of future-proofing NASSCOM, really looking at what are the skills that are going to be required, and governance also, which is something that's really close to your heart?
I must say that I've been quite busy in the last few months. And it's not about the usual things that you would expect, from a large institution that is already running so well. I think, both me as well as the SLT of NASSCOM, which is the senior leadership team, has been focused a lot on how do we future-proof NASSCOM in order to make sure that the kind of success we have had over the last 25 years sustains for the next 25 years.
Sure.
You might recall that when I first became chairman, just after the election process, there was a lot of noise around the fact that NASSCOM is only meant for the big companies and the large multinational companies.
Sure.
The reality is that that result came from a proper democratic voting process. But at the same time, what we have also done is understood what were the concerns, what was the feedback, and we will be addressing all of them in terms of just making sure that the charter of NASSCOM as well as the impact of NASSCOM is felt in the years to come in such a way that it is the large, the small, the startups, the business process companies, every true ingredient of the overall IT space of India actually participating at an executive level, council level of NASSCOM. When you look at the number of new nominated members we brought on the executive council of NASSCOM, almost every one of them came from the domestic companies and the domestic businesses, so to speak. So that whole mix has dramatically changed. It's a very well-matched kind of a mix. That's one. The second is we've also looked at all the NASSCOM entities to appreciate and understand how they are run. How do we make sure that each of these entities, whether it is NASSCOM Foundation, whether it is the Data Security Council of India or DSCI, and our role also in NSDC is properly represented from an executive council level.
Sure.
And that the executive council of NASSCOM, as well as the chairman's council of NASSCOM, which consists of some very senior, former CEOs and founders of, very well-known companies from India, participate in the long-term thinking of NASSCOM. And you will see that, each of these charters are changing in order to future-proof each of these entities so that the impact of NASSCOM in every one of these areas, whether it is the social area, whether it is the whole security area, or whether it is the skilling area, is very well felt.
Amongst the many things that has put India on the global stage in recent years, it has been its prowess as far as technology is concerned, IT is concerned. So if you were to pick 3 or 4 things that you think that has really worked for the tech space, and you want through this interview to say that these we have to look at upgrading and safeguarding if we want to remain the talent pool that we are, what would those be?
First and foremost, everyone appreciates and understands that tech is a way of life now. Every business in the world, irrespective of how they like to define themselves, really is a technology business now,
sure.
Right? And earlier we used to struggle to present this proposition, but today we don't struggle anymore because everyone appreciates and understands seeing the level of disruption that's happening in the marketplace. So I would say the biggest area of investment and focus has to be driving the whole skilling initiative,
sure.
In order to make sure that the Indian talent and the demographic dividend that we have is actually properly used in order to make India great, as well as drive more impact with global companies and their aspirations to become even bigger, even better, and even more responsible, so to speak. The second is appreciating and understanding very well all the new disruptive technology trends that are facing us.
Okay.
And we hear all these buzzwords about AI, ML, we hear about the Internet of Things, cloud, all of these kind of things. For us, all of these are really opportunity areas because they help transform businesses. They help create a completely new journey from a business point of view, and frankly from a NASSCOM and NASSCOM company's point of view, they create new opportunities of growth. What we can do therefore is make sure that we are creating more knowledge for our people in every one of these areas in different formats, so to speak. I think the third big area really is very exciting. It's what's happening with the whole startup ecosystem and the fact that India has taken off in such a big way. NASSCOM is playing a very important part in driving that. And the fourth, I would say, really is around the whole policy advocacy area. So while digital has taken off, some of the other things we just spoke about have all taken off, it has to be done in such a way that the central government, the state governments, and the industry bodies are working hand in hand in order to make sure that the right models are introduced, the right laws are created, and a proper appreciation of how government, the educational institutions, as well as each of the companies have to work together to create that big impact, for the country from a technology space. So I think these are all the kind of things that are keeping me awake at night, and they're all very interesting areas.
I want to continue looking at the big picture, and I want to look at what's really happening in the economy. Depending on whom you're listening to, the finance minister, for instance, on her part has said that 3.7%, but we're doing very well compared to what's happening across the world. Whereas if you're speaking to specific sectors, whether it's FMCG, auto, etc., everyone's really under what's happening in the economy. What side of the argument are you on? How, sitting where you are as the chairman of NASSCOM, how are you really looking at things?
As the chairman of NASSCOM, I can only tell you what we are seeing from a business point of view. And at this point in time, I will say that everything is positive. If you look at every one of the metrics that we generally track, which is revenue growth, companies have spoken about higher revenue growths for the year. Profitability continues to be strong. Client visits continues to be strong. Decision making continues to be strong. Look at job creation. There's a new report that came out that said in the first quarter itself, India created 85,000 new jobs in the technology sector. All of last year, we reported 150 or 170,000 new jobs. So actually, it's looking to be much better than what we saw last year. So at this point in time, I will say that while everyone is talking about recession, we are not seeing that impact on the IT side of the business as of now. If there is a downgrade in terms of global economies, one could actually see that as a big opportunity for the technology space, because when decisions need to get taken, they get taken. Then people get focused on reducing cost, becoming much better in terms of providing services to their client. But if everything becomes a full-blown recession, which people are talking about, it's a different matter. It will affect every kind of business in the long term. We'll have to wait and watch, because from my point of view, I'm not seeing that impacting any of the export-based businesses as of today. So I continue to be very positive.
You've said that investments into AI, for instance, that big businesses have made in the past are now showing up, and the benefits of those are showing up. So my question to you is, what about small businesses? What about the entrepreneur who's watching this interview to say, what happens to us then? Are you going to continue sounding as optimistic and as positive really about small businesses and their outlook?
Where we sit at NASSCOM, our focus is every business. So we are not here to just take care of the big businesses or the big companies. We are here to take care of India Incorporated from a technology point of view. I think what every business, small, medium, large, or even not yet created, any potential entrepreneur watching this interview also should understand and appreciate that the biggest opportunity facing us in this day and age is the kind of digital disruption that is taking place across the world. All old models are out of the window. There are completely new models that are now available to us. How do you do your shopping? With your kind of busy schedule, I'm pretty certain that most of your shopping
everything happens online.
You do online or on a phone or whatever. You must be ordering all your food online, and I can just go on and on. The same thing is happening to the insurance companies. It's happening to the banks. Nobody's focused on building brick and mortar anymore. It's all about digital. India, with the kind of demographic dividend that we have, with the kind of young talent that we have, with our natural affinity for both English as well as technology, and the fact that we have led the way in terms of understanding some of these new technology trends, investing behind it, getting NASSCOM and the government to work together on all of this, can actually lead the world and actually be the creator of resources for the world over the next 10 to 20 years is what I would be focused on. And I think every business today is looking at that opportunity, and that is actually driving the excitement for the future as well.
I'm going to slip into a very short break on that note, but much more on the other side in terms of that conversation with the chairman of NASSCOM. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we're bringing you part one of an exclusive conversation with the chairman of NASSCOM, Keshav Murugesh. I want to talk about the people aspect of the technology industry because both in terms of the investments you're making as well as the expenses that a company undertakes in this space, that really is the largest pool. NASSCOM in 2013 had come out with a report that said only 20 to 25% of all students coming out of colleges have the skill sets for the jobs for which they are being hired. Have things changed?
Yeah, things are changing. So first and foremost, the skills that we required in 2013 were very different to what we require now. So that comment may have been relevant for that particular point in time, but today we are working very closely with the government, with the National Skills Development Council, and defining the path that India must take. I think the biggest area of investment and focus from a NASSCOM point of view is really the whole skilling area.
Sure.
Our focus has moved away from the old model to one which is much more focused on skills. From scale to skills, I would say, is how we have chosen to move. We also understand that the opportunity for India in terms of driving leadership is so high that even the skills discussion, we must scale in a huge manner.
Okay.
And that's the reason why we have invested so much in terms of creating the future skills platform. We've got companies to participate. We have created new curriculum, particularly around the digital areas. And our focus here is to train up to 4 million, technology kind of workers or talent over the next few years. What's interesting is we've already signed up close to about 100 universities within this model. And I would say that close to 10,000 crores is already being spent in this area. And if you look at the agenda, the central government, state governments, as well as NASSCOM are talking the same language. But more importantly, every company in the business is also investing in talent. So I think this whole, skilling for the future is one of the biggest areas of focus and investment, and will hold India in very good stead for the long term.
Okay, for an entrepreneur watching this interview, then 2 or 3 things that you want them to understand when it comes to skilling, upskilling, reskilling their employees. It is crucial, but what should they keep in mind? Because for them, at the end of the day, it also comes down to the cost aspect.
Yeah, so I think from their point of view, it would be useful for them to align with NASSCOM, for example, become members of NASSCOM, take advantage of what has already been created. More importantly, take advantage of the learnings that some of the large companies have had and who have now helped to create this curriculum and the course design and things like that. So I think that's the first thing. The second is they should also work with us in terms of what they want in terms of the talent, right? Because for too long, India has focused on rote learning, right? And I'm pretty certain that all of them want to have very smart people around them. So I think culturally, we're also working with the government and others to really start appreciating and understanding the changes that are required in curriculum, how businesses are transforming, how businesses are changing, and therefore the need for a completely new kind of talent. So I would say that while all of us are very focused on STEM, from the past, our focus has now shifted much more from STEM to STEAM, where it is STEM along with, the arts, where the talent understands all of these areas, but also can make a presentation, is articulate, can present a value proposition very well to a potential customer, and can see the big picture. So it's a very interesting transformation that is taking place in terms of our aspiration for talent and what we are doing with all of these models driven by future skilling.
Speaking of future skilling, some job roles, and I was looking at some data that said that a cybersecurity engineer, for instance, today commands nothing less than a 35% year-on-year increase in salaries, something that small businesses can't necessarily afford. How is that perhaps going to level out?
The wonderful thing is that, you're actually seeing in certain jobs, people getting paid significantly higher than the traditional wage inflation. That itself shows you how much demand there is for the hot, talent. And, if we, step aside and take a look at some of the other talents, if I just talk to you about the IoT and analytics areas, as well as machine learning and robotics and things like that, there is a huge demand for talent in these areas. In fact, the pent-up demand is close to about 800 or 900,000 people, of which maybe 200,000 jobs would be ready. And we are predicting that over the next 3 years, it will become 2.7 million, and maybe the number of jobs will be, close to almost 3 or 4 times what it is today, which is 200,000 into 3 or 4 times.
Sure.
So the demand is huge, and therefore one will need to pay a lot of money to get this kind of talent. For the small companies, the reality, they can't afford it, but they can actually insource a lot of these capabilities from other companies who focus only on this. So if it's cybersecurity, why do you want to create it yourself, right? You can always outsource it to another startup that has created that offering. You have to pick the areas you want to invest in. That's my advice, and go after that, and appreciate and understand that there are many other areas that you will need, which can actually be, outsourced. So I think there is enough potential and opportunity for all.
Okay. On the other side, I do know that entry-level salaries for anyone who's entering, a fresher entering a job at this point hasn't really moved in a decade. Is that something you're concerned about, or is it just the supply and demand that you were talking about?
No, actually, it's good where entry-level salaries, remain, flat or are accelerating at a agreed rate, at a sensible rate.
Okay.
I think it's good because for companies to prepare their models and to create plans for the future, it creates a lot of stability.
Sure.
The demand for high quality people, particularly in some of the new areas, is very high. The struggle really is, why is the industry still having, very, very high levels of attrition? When CEOs of companies, NASSCOM companies are interacting with their investors, they're having to actually answer this question saying, my model plans for high levels of attrition in certain areas. It could be voice, it could be, certain geographies, things like that. But in the high impact areas where I don't want attrition, I have the policies and the wage structures in place to ensure I don't have that. So on a blended basis, it looks good overall. I would say that, attrition is a way of life. The wage escalation will happen the way it should happen. The market is a great leveler, so leave it as it is.
The other part of talent really, and that perhaps has consumed all the news really coming out of the tech industry over the past few years, is what's happening on visas, particularly H-1B visas. Data showing that only 2.6% of all visas that are being given out are going to the top 7 IT companies in India. But going by the commentary coming out of the US, going by the commentary really coming out of the US government, it seems like all the visas seem to be coming to Indian companies. Where's that mismatch happening?
So that's a great question. So, the reality is that if you look at the visas issued to, Indian companies, one is, as you said, 2.6% of the 85,000 only comes to the top 7 companies. The rest really are going to companies operating out of India, but they are global multinational companies, right? And therefore, it clearly demonstrates the need for this great talent from India to really support the cause of multinational companies across the globe. If you go deeper into this issue, I think one has to appreciate that maybe, the people approving these visas have not really appreciated some of the core parts of the discussion, which is that the US today has 7.5 million jobs available, which are to be hired. And there's a
in
job
the tech
gap,
space.
Generally in the US economy, of which 67% has a tech component, right? And that is getting filled by different models, including the H-1B model, right? And H-1B is just 85,000 people. So I think the focus has to be, how do we deliver more STEM resources? How do we get more technology-enabled resources in the US and other countries as well, in order to deliver on this resource gap to meet the demands of a transforming world, which is driven by technology. That is one. Second thing is, there's also this misconception and certain myths that Indian companies don't pay enough. Recently, we did a very interesting report with IHS Markit, where we demonstrated that Indian companies operating in the US actually present or give their employees an average of $97,000 against what US companies give $94,000 or so. So we actually pay higher salaries than even the US companies. If you look at the contribution of Indian companies in the US, Indian companies contribute about $57 billion to the GDP in different formats, which is higher than 6 states of the US itself. It's a big number.
Sure.
Similarly, if you just look at the wage bill that Indian companies pay in the US, it's $16.7 billion in 2017. And all of that money just goes into the local kind of community and local economy, so to speak. So I think some of these numbers, some of these facts are all being presented now by us at NASSCOM to the various members or the key members of the administration in the US to help them appreciate that all we want from them is a level playing field for Indian tech companies as well as the multinational companies, and not to assume that they are all benefiting in the same manner. In fact, the Indian IT companies are getting higher visa rejections at this point in time. But I must say that the administration actually is appreciating the effort that we are putting in from NASSCOM to explain all of this. And now the discussion has shifted away from H-1Bs to much more, oh my God, we have this big need for technology skills in the US, and we have not even thought of it in this fashion. And can NASSCOM help us in order to train our talent in 2-3 of the big new disruptive areas, AI, ML, things like that. And that's the next level of discussion that we are having with them. So it's become far more collaboration. I think the noise levels are also coming down.
Sure.
And I think it's a journey. Over a period of time, you will see changes there.
All right, that's all we could manage to pack into the show tonight. But if you have any feedback for us, our contact details coming up in just a moment. We love hearing from you. Do get in touch. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.